So I've got to change the tuning slightly. And while I'm doing that, I can tell you a little bit about the piece. So my name is Sable, or I guess people now know me as Peter as well. It's my last name. But so I'm going to play a piece called Yangguan Sandia, which means three variations on the Yangguan theme. And it's based on a famous poem by a Tang Dynasty poet named Wang Wei. And the poem is about seeing an old friend off at the borders of the country. And so we know in Tang Dynasty times, you know, if you go past the end of the country, you may never see your friends ever again. So it's a bit of a sad piece about sitting and having one last cup of alcohol with your friend that you're about to see off into the night, right? And they say once you pass the edge of the mountains, there's no familiar friends, and so your friend's going to leave. But the piece is composed into three basically identical sections that slowly develop over time. And it starts very slow, lamenting, and in the middle piece, you're kind of agitated and frustrated that you have to say goodbye to your friend. And then by the end of it, you know, you're resolute and you're ready to move on with your life and continue. And one of the other things I really like about it is it's not in standard tuning, and so the tonal center of the piece is slightly different. Usually the tonal center of the piece, well, there's a bunch of different tonal centers, but the tonal center of this piece is a B flat, and it ends on, if you're thinking it heptatonically, it ends on something like a major seventh, which feels like it doesn't resolve. And basically at the end of the piece, you're kind of calling out into the distance and waiting to hear a response from your friend, but you don't hear it. And so that's sort of like the piece doesn't resolve at the very end. And so there's a lot of like call back and forth where you're like saying something and there's a repeat, an echo coming back to you. So see if you can hear any of the echoes as I play the piece. The next piece I'm going to play is called Odo Wanji. And Odo Wanji is, I don't really know how to translate it. On the poster, it said herons and intentions.
Yes, I choose to use the
philosophical name for it. Yeah, it's a piece with the like distinctly Taoist flavor. And when I learned it, so the teacher who taught me, he told me a story that I think this might be a common story because I think it's associated with a proverb. But imagine that so there's a fisherman one day, and you know he really enjoys, the favorite thing that he enjoys is going out onto the ocean and fishing, and he enjoys it on his boat. There's a bunch of herons that come down and sit with him, and seagulls that sit with him on his boat. And he really enjoys this every day, just fishing and hanging with the birds and observing them. And then, but you know, of course, at these times, people are very poor and they take all the food that they can get. And he comes back and his wife says, well, if there's all these birds sitting with you on the boat, why don't you also kill the birds and hunt the birds? So he says, okay, fine. And so he goes out onto the boat. But for some reason this day, when he goes and sits to throw his net out, the seagulls just watch him above and they don't come down at all. Right? It's almost though they could sense something about him. And so the piece itself is meant to evoke sort of like a seaside, seascape place where there's all these animals and birds and fish and everything sort of naturally live in harmony with one another. And of course, it's the, you know, seas are violent places. There's animals that kill and eat one another and all sorts of things like that. But they all sort of live in a natural harmony. And I think that's sort of associated with this like Taoist notion of the fact that you may have all these intentions and you may have all these things that you have in your life, but you know, if you're just a heron or if you're just a seagull, you can sort of forget those intentions or forget the machinations. Is the other way that I was translating the name. It's mostly a joke because the last character in the thing, Chi, is like Chi Chi to Chi. All right, this one's. All right, let me just check my tune one more time.